Okay, welcome to what I think is my third video in my bookshelf tour. This tour has gone on way longer than I anticipated, and it was originally supposed to be one video, um, but I've already shot so much footage that I'm inevitably going to have to break this up. So, anyway, um, we still have a lot more books to go, and I'm going to be a little more hasty in this final installment because I could easily go on for, I think, 4 more hours talking about these books, but I'm gonna try and not, spend too much time on one particular book or another. But I will stop for some ones that I really do want to talk about. But I will keep in mind to make haste. So, okay. Oh, I should note these shelves. If the last two shelves we've been through were disorganized, these ones here are very disorganized, as you'll see. So, okay, starting off here from the top, we have the Loeb Classical Library. This is Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These will be the volumes I have for the original Greek I'll keep these until I can read Homeric Greek without a facing page translation, and when that happens, I'll replace these with the Oxford Classical Text editions. So, but yeah, Homer. I don't have the Homeric hymns or the Lives of Homer or any of the other ephemera. Another volume that's kind of related to this that I really want to get, it's a Loeb volume. I think it's called Greek Epic Fragments or just Epic Fragments. I don't remember the title off the top of my head. I'll put it on the screen. I want that volume, and for two reasons. Well, one, because of it just collects all the fragments of the epic cycle, and then also it's translated by a scholar named M.L. West, who we'll see on this bookshelf tour, who is a great scholar of Indo-European myth and poetics, and particularly he wrote a commentary on the lot of the epic cycle, and then he wrote a book called The Making of the Iliad, and then he wrote a book called The Making of the Odyssey. And weirdly enough, The Making of the Odyssey is like $40, and The Making of the Iliad is like $200, which is kind of weird. But anyway, did I say I was going to make haste? Okay, so here we have more Pindar, and this is translated by a scholar named John Edwards. Is it John Edward? Well, J.E. Sandys. I can't remember exactly what the J.E. stands for, but he is a scholar we will also see later on in this bookshelf tour. He's right above my shoulder here, this set of books. We'll get to that. But yeah, Pindar. Here we have a very interesting Loeb volume. This is Menetho. Now, Menetho was an Egyptian priest who wrote in Greek and lived, if I remember correctly, in the 3rd century BC. He was a priest at a place called Heliopolis, and if I remember correctly, he was also, of the little details we know of his life, he played a role in founding a cult of Serapis, and he wrote many works. The one work that I'm most familiar with, the one that we have some fragments of, is a work of Egyptian history called the Egyptiaca. And the Egyptiaca is one of those works that, if I could make a top 10 list and snap my fingers, and I could summon any lost work, out of the void, it'd be the Egyptiaca, because it was a work of ancient Egyptian history written by an ancient Egyptian and written in Greek. So that's a tremendous loss. But anyway, Loeb collected all the known fragments and summaries and epitomes of this author and put it in one volume. That is fantastic. I believe previously this Manetho used to be in a volume with Loeb combined him with another Greek author named Ptolemy, but not Ptolemy Soter, Alexander's friend. Ptolemy the what would you call him? The astrologer. I think it was Manetho and then Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. I think that was together in one volume. But then I think they broke Manetho off as with his own volume. I used to have the old volume. That's why I'm mentioning that. Anyway, a really cool Loeb to have. Okay. Here we have the letters of the younger Pliny. And these are this is translated by Betty Radis, who hopefully some of you may recognize that name. She was one of the editors of Penguin Classics for a very long time. Her translation of Pliny is also the translation that Penguin Classics still uses. She also translated, I believe, The Praise of Folly of Erasmus. And Penguin did a really interesting volume. It's really, I don't know if it's hard to find. You can find it. I haven't checked the price in a long time, but when Betty Radis passed away, her children did like a special Penguin volume called The Translator's Art, and it was a collection of essays. There was like an introductory essay about Betty Radis, written by I think one of her children or both of her children, and then various essays about translating itself, which Betty Radis, she translated Latin works, and she oversaw many of the translations that Penguin published. Like, for example, Aubrey de Selincourt, who I mentioned in my first video, my first bookshelf video. But anyway, Betty Radis is in the Loeb Classical Library. And for those who don't know who Pliny is, he was a I don't have the dates of his life off the top of my head. End of the 1st century AD into the 2nd century AD. He was a friend of Tacitus. He wrote some letters to Tacitus, one particular amazing one, which he proclaims he predicts the immortality of Tacitus's work. Pliny could not have been more right. In here, you also get the eruption of Vesuvius and Pliny's relative, Pliny the Elder, who died in that at Pompeii. Anyway, so if this is for those who are like trying to get into Roman authors, Pliny would be a good author to start with. Him and another author named Suetonius, both really good authors, both writing at the same time. Anyway, I told myself to make haste. Okay. Here we have Sallust. I believe this is an older Loeb volume. I think Loeb does Sallust in 2 volumes now. They do the Conspiracy of Catiline and then the War with Jugurtha, and then they do like the fragments of the histories and the letters to Caesar, the speeches to Caesar in a separate volume. But I think going back to the beginning, they did a single volume of Sallust, the 1st century BC Roman historian. Here we have Cornelius Nepos. Not a very well-known Roman author. He lived in the 1st century BC. He was a friend of Cicero, if I remember correctly. And he wrote these kind of lives of illustrious men of antiquity. And I first became aware of him because of he wrote biographies on 2 Greeks that I'm very interested in. One is Miltiades, who was the general at the Battle of Marathon, and then he wrote a biography of Epaminondas, who was the man who defeated the Spartans. And I think I've repeated this. I said this earlier in the bookshelf tour, but who Plutarch considered to be the greatest of the Greeks. I'm not going to talk about Epaminondas because I could talk for a while. Okay. Here we have an author I briefly mentioned in a video a few years ago. This is Aulus Gellius. His very literary work called The Attic Nights, because it's called that because he started writing this work while he was in Attica during the winter, and it's valuable because it gives you a lot of insight into, I guess, Roman social customs, but also it has he quotes a lot. From other works, many of which don't survive. But yeah, this is a very interesting work. This is the kind of work that I'd love for like a major publisher like Penguin or Oxford. I've said this before. Do a translation of Aulus Gellius in one volume. I'd love to have a one-volume Attic Nights. That would be fantastic. Okay, here we have Henry Fernaux's edition of the Annals of Tacitus. And this is all Latin. So you get the Latin and an insane amount of notes. An insane amount. Together, I mentioned earlier that my edition of Ronald Syme's work, Tacitus, his 2-volume study of Tacitus, was my college graduation gift to myself. I also got this directly afterwards to pair with it. Okay. Here we have John Gardner, his biography of Chaucer. I love John Gardner, and we'll see more of him in this bookshelf tour. This is like a popular history book. This is called A History of Histories, Epics, Chronicles, Romances, and Inquiries from Herodotus and Thucydides to the 20th century. There we go. As I think I've said before, historiography is one of my favorite subjects to read about. I just find it endlessly fascinating. Here is a work I recently got. We saw this author earlier in the bookshelf tour. This is Charles Doughty, and he wrote the work Travels in Arabia Deserta, and this is his poem, I should say, The Dawn in Britain. It's a single-volume edition. This was originally published in 6 volumes in the early 1900s. Doughty is most known for Travels in Arabia Deserta. I wouldn't say that's what gave him immortality, but if anyone knows him, they know him for that work. What they don't know is that he considered himself foremost to be a poet. That was his main thing, poetry. And then he had his 2 years he spent in Arabia, and then his work, which had an immense impact on people like Lawrence of Arabia. But what's interesting about my edition of this is that it's one of 500. Well, 535, but 500 sold to the public. I have copy number 87. And this is I recently got this. Doughty really interests me. I'd like to have all of his poetry. He wrote a few other books of poetry. This is the only one I have, just because the title so deeply intrigued me. I have not read this yet. I bought it because, again, the scarcity of this volume, I had an opportunity to get it for a relatively reasonable price, and so I bought it, and I sort of tucked it away for later. So I'll eventually come around to this, but I don't know a whole lot about it. It's like a gigantic blank verse epic. This is like an epic poem, a 20th century epic poem that's very mythological. I can't say much more than that. I'd be very interested, if anyone's watching this video, if you have read this, let me know. I'm very curious. I've read some reviews of it. I have an edition of T.E. Lawrence's letters, and I read every letter in which he name drops this. And I read some interesting comments from Lawrence on this. Mostly him commenting on the strangeness of this. But anyway, yeah, this is The Dawn in Britain. So, here we have more, oh, almost fell. Here we have more Petrarch, the great illustration on the cover. This is another translation, some letters. Here we have this book that was published in 2023. This is The Indo-Europeans, Archaeology, Language, Race, and the Search for the Origins of the West. I read this when it came out, and I learned a lot of really interesting things about this very complex subject. Another one of my favorite subjects is Indo-European linguistics, the interconnectedness of all the languages of, basically the languages stretching from India to Ireland. It's just utterly fascinating, and it's a very complicated subject. And this is a really good book giving you an overview of the history of this topic. And so, yeah, I really want to reread this. There was actually two books that came out in the last month in Indo-Europe, in the field of Indo-European studies. One was a more popular history book called Proto by an author, I think, by the name of, I want to say like Laura Spinney or something. I'll put it on the cover, I'll put the cover up. There's that, which is about, well, actually, I don't, I'm trying to remember what I remember from the description of that book. Well, anyway, it's about Proto-Indo-European, which is like the mother language of all the languages of, or pretty much almost all the languages from like northern India to Ireland. And then the second book is The Indo-Europeans Rediscovered by J.P. Mallory, who is an author who has published before on Indo-European studies. He did a book back, I think, maybe in the late 80s called In Search of the Indo-Europeans. And then he was a editor of I want to say like an Indo-European dictionary of sorts or encyclopedia, and a very expensive book that goes for like $900 online. He recently came out with a book, called The Indo-Europeans Rediscovered, which incorporates a lot of the genetic discoveries that have been made in the last like 15 years. So I'll probably read those and reread this. Yeah. Okay. Here we have another edition of, this is just Emerson's essays. It's the first and second series. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it was upside down. Haha. You could not see it. Yeah, there you go. This is just my go-to, like, one-volume edition of all the essays. So I've kind of just held on to this. I don't think I'll keep it, to be quite honest, just because I have a lot of Emerson, and I already have two different editions of the essays. This is a book I got recently. I've not read this one yet. This is Magic into Science, the Story of Paracelsus. And this text here says, the wonder healer and alchemist of the Renaissance, whose feats led to the Faust myth, father of chemotherapy and foreshadower of modern psychiatry, outstanding, colorful figure in the transition from magic into science. So that's what compelled me to get this. Robert Browning wrote a poem, I think it's called Paracelsus. I think so. A name I've seen, but don't know much about. So I saw this in a bookstore window and I got it. I'm not going to pick it up, but up here I have a book called Treasures of Prehistoric Art. Okay, so going over here, I have, this is going to take a second, one moment. I have the Charles Singleton translation, the 6th volume. Okay, this is going to be a lot here. One second. Dante's Divine Comedy, the 6th volume Princeton edition with all the commentary. This translation was reprinted last year in a single volume by Princeton. It's a prose translation of Dante. And so, they've had this translation for a while in this edition. But yeah, they now siphoned off the translation without the commentary and republished it last year. So if you want a prose translation of Dante, there you go. This gives you a hint. This is the, or not hint, but this shows the randomness. The next book is The Diary of Fyodor Dostoevsky. The Diary of a Writer. Really big volume. For any Dostoevsky fans, you should seek this out. Okay. We have a bunch of Itati Renaissance Library volumes. Again, I say this earlier in the bookshelf tour, but this is from the same. This is also from Harvard University Press, and it has the same sort of ethos as the Loeb, where it's Latin or Italian on the one side, and then the facing page translation. So here we have one of the great these humanists. This is Angelo Poliziano. This is the 2 volumes of his miscellanies, and then the first volume of his letters. Itati has not published the 2nd volume yet. But yeah, Angelo Poliziano. Here we have one of the great printers of the Renaissance. This is Aldus Manutius. This is his prefaces to Greek and Latin classics. And also this includes a work called Humanism. So yeah, there's a book I really want on Aldus Manutius titled The World of Aldus Manutius. Yeah. It's kind of expensive online, but I really want to get that. I really want to read a biography of Aldus and also of Gutenberg. Because I want to better my understanding of the printing press in the early years. Here is a work titled On Discovery by Polydore Vergil, in which he looks back to antiquity to figure out all the firsts that occurred. Here is a translator's defense, in which this scholar makes a case for studying biblical Hebrew along with Greek and Latin. Here we have the great Lorenzo Valla. So I have his dialectical disputations, his correspondence, and then his very famous work on the donation of Constantine, which he uses philology to rip that document apart. Okay, moving on. This is Washington Irving's The Conquest of Granada. I went to Spain for the first time last year and became really interested in the Reconquista. And also, I took up an interest in Washington Irving because of he spent some time in Spain and he wrote The Tales of the Alhambra. He wrote this. He wrote another work that involved Spain. I'm blanking on it. So yeah, I wanted to learn more about, Granada was the last holdout against I guess you could say, Christendom. So it was like the Reconquista and then Washington Irving, and I landed here. So the Conquest of Granada, so that's why I have this. I've not finished this. I read half of this and I got distracted by other stuff, but it was amazing. Which seems like a contradictory statement. If it's amazing, why didn't I finish it? Well, that's a good question. Here is the collected poems of Odysseus Elatus, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature for his poetry. This is a Greek poet. I think he won in 77. I don't remember if that's correct. Here is a volume I've shown on this channel before. This is the Ciceronian Controversies, the great debate as to the Renaissance scholars debating on how they should write Latin prose. So yeah, another great volume from Itati. Here we have a work that I've not read yet, and I can't confess to knowing a lot about it. I took up an interest in it because of, let me show you this. Well, okay, actually, let me take a step back. This is the book. It's one work, 2 volumes. The Histories. This is from the Dumbarton Oaks Medieval Library, which is Same concept, same publisher as The Loeb and the Atati. This is medieval works with the original language and then the facing page translation. And so they do Old English authors, and they do Byzantine authors like this one. We'll see the Old English soon. And this is a work of history that comes close to the downfall before the Ottomans took Constantinople. So we have this, the histories by this author whose name I really don't know how to pronounce, and I'm not going to even try. And it's this is translated by Anthony Caldelas, who is one of the foremost Byzantine scholars of our time. And he wrote this companion volume called A New Herodotus. So you can read the subtitle there. And so that, of course, caught my eye, as you can imagine. So this author, this Byzantine author, took up Herodotus and Thucydides as his models for his history. That's as far as I'm aware of. I've not yet read these volumes. It's kind of a bit of a reading project for me. Overall, my knowledge of Greece and Rome, I would say, is very good, or as good as one can get in English. And but my knowledge of the Byzantine Empire is not great, but improving. And I really have not read a lot of primary sources from the Byzantines, besides Procopius. I want to read like the Alexiad and Michael Psellus and all the, whatever's published in the Dumbarton Oaks for Byzantine authors. This is probably also top of my list when it comes to Byzantine primary sources. So yeah, anyway, here we have the Beowulf manuscript. So you have Beowulf with the facing page translation, the other poems that were included within that manuscript, as well as a very interesting document titled Alexander the Great's letter to Aristotle, from Alexander the Great's letter to Aristotle about India. And then the Old English poems of Cunewulf. That has got to be one of the coolest names ever. Just saying. A huge jump in terms of subject matter. This is Joseph McElroy's Women and Men. It's a book, one of those books I've had on my shelves for a long time. Still have not read it. I bought it when I was far more interested in reading it, the idea of reading it. But there is just so many other books I'd rather read before this one. I don't know if I'll hold on to this. I'm not too sure. And then I have his first novel, this is Joseph McElroy's first novel, A Smuggler's Bible. Again, got this at a time where I was much more interested in Joseph McElroy. Here we have another book about Lawrence of Arabia. This is The Home Letters of T.E. Lawrence and His Brothers. Yeah, I've been slowly just collecting every bit of writing that Lawrence ever wrote. I have a few more volumes to pick up, but I ended up finding this for a really good price. We'll see Lawrence 2 more times on this bookshelf tour. Here we have Everyman's Library edition of Goethe. This is the selected works. This has Young Werther. This has Elective Affinities. Yeah, Elective Affinities. Italian Journey, Faust 1 and 2, and then poems, some letters. So, yeah. Here we have Stephen Runciman's History of the Crusades. This Penguin came out with these volumes. Let's see here. There you go. Stephen Runciman is a scholar who interests me deeply. This is probably, I think, his most famous work. He did a book about the fall of Constantinople. He did a few other things. Why am I blanking? Oh, he did a book called like The Eastern Schism. And then there was a biography of him in 2017, I think, titled, I think it was like The Byzantine Life of Stephen Runciman, which I think got some really good reviews. And it was like a 700-page biography, which is kind of cool that a scholar could get a biography that large, you know, I guess in more recent times. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's the history of the Crusades. Here is a book, another book I've showed on this channel before. This is The Discovery and Conquest of Peru by Pedro de Cieza de Leon. One of the primary sources for Francisco Pizarro and Atahualpa and the fall of the Incas. Here is a biography of Bernal Diaz, historian of the conquest. Bernal Diaz wrote a great work of history, or at least he dictated it. I don't think he physically wrote it. He dictated it. The title is usually translated in English as The Conquest of New Spain or The Discovery and Conquest of Mexico. Bernal Diaz served under Hernan Cortez and fought his way to the capital of the Aztec Empire. And his historical work is simply one of the most unbelievable things I've ever read. It's, of course, you know, it's not 100% the truth, but it's relating events that legitimately happened. And those events are, if you read them in a work of fiction, you'd think that they'd be unbelievable. And yet it happened. And yeah, I'll never forget when I first read the Conquest of New Spain. There's this terrifying moment when they're fighting in Mexico City, and Bernal Diaz describes the terrible the drum sound that was emitting from the temples. They're fighting in the streets against these plumed Aztec warriors, and they can hear this awful like doosh, 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 coming from the temples, and they knew in that moment that, as Bernal Diaz says, that their comrades, right, to use a more modern term, comrades were being sacrificed to the Aztec war god. It was absolutely terrifying the way he described it. Yeah, I could easily talk about the Conquest of New Spain for a while. So yeah, anyways, this is a biography of Bernal Diaz. Which, a funny story about this is I discovered this book. It was like 12 p.m. one day, and I was doing some research about primary sources about the fall of the Aztecs, and I came across this book in a bibliography, and I was like, "Whoa! I didn't know there was a Bernal Diaz biography in English." And I kid you not, I was in a used bookstore 5 hours later, and I found this. I'd never seen it before, so I discovered it just by happenstance online at noon, and then at 5 p.m. it was like it found me. It was a very weird coincidence. So, yeah, okay. Here is Bartolome de las Casas. This is a short account of the destruction of the Indies. He was a Spaniard who ripped apart and criticized the actions of the conquistadors and Columbus in the New World. This is sort of him writing back towards home, so they knew the atrocities that were being committed. So yeah, very, very important work. And then there's Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, Chronicle of the Narvaez expedition. These shipwrecked Spaniards landed on the shores of Florida and basically fought their way across North America. I won't say fought, but they made their way across. So yeah, another one of those interesting accounts from the New World. Okay, here we have a few Cambridge Ancient History volumes. Again, another volume I've shown on this channel before. This is the Cambridge Ancient History, the Assyrian Empire. These volumes, so you got, I think, is that Ashurbanipal? I don't know. Tiglath-Pileser. These volumes are are there. It's not like, you know, a gigantic history of the Assyrian Empire written by one person. It's a collection of chapters, sort of like an overview of the era. Um, and so yeah, they're really, if you're deep into like the, I guess, more scholarly stuff, if you want to learn, you know, I don't know. For example, I guess in the broader Cambridge ancient history, if you want to learn about agrarian law in the first century AD, then you're going to want to get the like the Cambridge ancient history volume that covers that time period, and you'll find a chapter about, you know, agrarian law or something. So it's really good for broad scope stuff and also minutia about, you know, how the economy worked at that time, or, you know, what did, you know, the Navy, how did the Navy work? So it's just like aspects of that time. So this stuff is great. Here we have the Persian Empire in the West. There you have a king of kings. There is an Achaemenid king. There you go. And then here we go. This is the Augustan Empire. There he is. There's Augustus. One of the bigger volumes. Here we have the Hellenistic monarchies and the rise of Rome, when the Romans came to dominate the Mediterranean. Here we have this Princeton Library Classics. This is Eric Auerbach's famous literary study, Mimesis, a study of the representation of reality in Western literature, which he looks at different works from the Western canon, like the Odyssey. He looks at Rabelais. He looks at Don Quixote. He looks at the 3rd century AD historian Ammianus Marcellinus. Virginia Woolf. Sorry, that was my watch. Yeah, very famous study. He also wrote a work called Dante, Poet of the Secular World, which I don't have but want. Here's a book, interesting book. This is Mathematical Thought from Ancient to Modern Times, which I have not yet read. I got it for 2 reasons. One, I want a better understanding of ancient mathematics, but also I'm a mathematics. I have a mechanical engineering degree, but I also have a minor in mathematics. So I used to hate mathematics as a kid, and then it wasn't until college that I came to love it. And I took many math classes, but one that I never took was like linear algebra. I feel like I need to fix that. I feel like this need to go back and learn linear algebra. But I'm also interested in just the history of mathematics, particularly of the ancients. So that's why I got this. But it's been sitting on my shelf for a while, so I have no idea when I'll get to it. Eventually, one day. So. This is Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac and Other Writings. Another great Library of America volume. Sand County Almanac is one of the most famous writings of ecology. Here we have a very interesting work that I have not made it all the way through because it's all over the place. This is from the Hakluyt Society. This is we saw a volume from this publisher in the last video. The volume I had called Agatharchides of Cnidus, on the Erythraean Sea. This is Olaus Magnus, a description of the northern peoples. So there's the cover. And this is translated by Peter Fisher, right? Yeah, Peter Fisher and Humphrey Higgins. Peter Fisher translated I had another translation from him that I don't currently have. He translated Saxo Grammaticus, who is where we get the Hamlet story from, Amleth. I read his... No, I didn't finish Saxo Grammaticus, I should say. I did not finish him. But on the back, I learned that Peter Fisher had translated this author named Olaus Magnus. I was like, who the hell is that? And I did some research, and I found out that the Hakluyt Society published the full work. And it was outrageously expensive online. And then another very strange coincidence happened, and I found it a week later in a bookstore for a very reasonable price. Let me see if I can show you some chapter titles here to give you a sense of like the stuff covered in here. So you have On Different Kinds of Ice. Let's see. That's a chapter. This is On the Mysterious Nature of Some Mountains. On the Apparitions of Drowned Men. Let's see. On the Assault Against the Gods. Let's see. What else? On Dances of Sighing or Mourning. On Activities by Moonlight. So, I mean, yeah, this is a description of the northern people. So it's just like a huge, like all over the place compendium about various subjects. So you have to be really interested to read the whole thing through. It's kind of good to just dip into and read a chapter here and there or something like that. So yeah. Here's a study I got recently. This is Romans in a New World. Classical Models in 16th Century Spanish America. I've not read this yet. This is, let's see here. The ancient Romans haunted the Spanish conquest of the New World, often as passionately rejected models. While the conquistadors challenged the reputation of Romans for incomparable military genius and daring, they also considered Rome an exemplar of imperialistic motives and behavior fit for Christians to follow and as a yardstick against which to measure the cultural level of the natives of the New World. Meanwhile, Spanish critics of the conquest launched a concerted assault upon those prominent uses of ancient Rome as a model. I won't continue reading, but that's just the first paragraph of the description. So, a very interesting subject. I guess, you know, how Rome haunted over the New World and how it affected the behavior of the Spaniards. Very interesting stuff. Let's see here. This is a great Penguin volume. I'm glad they did this. This is The Prophecies of Nostradamus, a dual language edition. I don't know what the hell that cover's about. Probably could have picked something better. But yeah, Nostradamus. Here we have Lady Gregory. This is her collected writings on Cuchulainn? Cuchulainn? Is that the right pronunciation? I once heard Cuchulainn, but that did not sound right. Cuchulainn? Please correct me in the comments if I mispronounced that, or I guess mispronounce anything at all. I don't profess perfect pronunciation. But yeah, Lady Gregory, she played a very important role in the Irish literary revival and was a benefactor of W.B. Yeats. And she collected a lot of Irish mythological tales and consolidated them. And so I found this volume. I had a Penguin Classic volume for a while called The Selected Writings of Lady Gregory. Was that the title? Selected Writings? There's another volume that she did called Gods and Fighting Men, which it's one of those titles that I'm constantly on the lookout for. I particularly wanted this old, let's see here, this publisher, Colin Smythe edition. They did a few other editions. They did a lot of volumes of Lady Gregory. They did Gods and Fighting Men. They did Visions and Beliefs in the West of Ireland. They did they did her selected plays. They did her, I want to say, letters. I'd like to have as much Lady Gregory as possible. So yeah. but she's not really someone you find often in used bookstores. Here we have William Blake's Illustrations for the Divine Comedy, one of these books that Taschen comes out with. They publish a lot of interesting stuff, particularly illustrated stuff. Let's see. Let's find a good illustration here. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I love William Blake. Okay, we've hit a string of Sir Thomas. He was never knighted. He was never knighted. I don't know why I said that. Thomas Carlyle. This is his historical essays in a massive volume. This is from the University of California Press. They're slowly doing this huge scholarly set for Carlyle. I'll show you the two other ones I have here. Here's Sartor Resartus. There's a younger Carlyle. And then I have another edition of his lectures on heroes. So, let's see. They've done a few more volumes I don't have. This is all I have from that publication. I'm looking for the University of California Press edition of his work, Past and Present. I want to get my hands on that. So, yeah, okay. 1 second. Just shoving these back. Here we have Lord Chesterfield's letters to his son. I don't know, is this unabridged? I never checked. I think it might be unabridged. Chesterfield usually gets abridged. Yeah. I found this dirt cheap, so, yeah. Here we have some more language books. I have, this is the new Penguin Russian course. And then I have colloquial Swedish. This is a book I found, but it's way above my pay grade. I can't yet read it and comprehend it. This is the Linear B Decipherment Controversy Re-Examined. Linear B is what you could call Mycenaean Greek, like Proto-Greek, the earliest form of Greek that we know of. Here is a recent publication from, this is last year. I found out about this through the YouTuber Scorpio Martianus. He praised this book, and he interviewed the author. This is The Lighthouse, a thematic guide to ancient Greek vocabulary and set phrases. This is Vox Graeca. This is the pronunciation of classical Greek. Castle's Latin Dictionary. Here we have, this is Jakob Burckhardt again. This is an oversized edition of the Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy. And it includes a lot of, unfortunately, black and white, but Renaissance paintings and whatnot, and pictures of sculpture. That's cool. Okay, so that's this first column here. Okay, continuing on. This is The German Conception of History, which is a book about, I won't say revolution is not the right word, but I'll say the new historical attitude that developed in Germany in the 19th century. Our way today of thinking about history is largely due to these 19th century German academics, predominantly 19th century German academics, which they said, and which we now, which still remains true, is that history is what actually happened, what you can prove happened, or is what likely happened based on all the available sources. Which may seem self-evident. It's like, yeah, that's what history should be. Of course, that's what, yeah. But for the longest time, it was not that. If you go back to the father of history, you go back to Herodotus himself. Um, he, in recounting the life of Cyrus the Great, who lived about 100 years before the time Herodotus was writing, Herodotus will put dialogue in the mouth of Cyrus the Great, dialogue that Herodotus invented. And that doing that today, if you were to invent dialogue for a historical figure, the moment you do that, you would discredit yourself as a historian, and your work would be closer to historical fiction. But that is something that was done in the ancient world. That was one of the first devices used by the ancients in telling history. And so an example of with this new historical attitude developing in the 19th century, the German academics, for example, they tore apart Livy. They ripped him apart. Livy wrote a history, was a first century BC historian. He did the first century AD. He wrote a work called Ab Urbe Condita, which means from the founding of the city. And his history goes all the way back to the times of Romulus and Remus. And you can, just a casual reader today can tell that a lot of the things that he's telling, it's astonishingly entertaining, but most certainly did not happen in the way that Livy is relating it. And he would probably not expect you to necessarily believe that. Livy had many intentions with his work, but essentially, the German academics realized that any record of things that might have occurred prior to the Roman when the Gauls took Rome in 390 BC, when Rome burned in 390 BC, any account of what occurred before that event should be treated with extreme skepticism, because whatever archives or documents that might have existed that could have been available to a first century BC historian was likely destroyed. That's a huge assumption, but that's an example of the kind of historical thinking that was brought to bear in the 19th century. Well, what can we really know about what occurred before 390 BC? Anyway, that's just an example. So this is a book about that historical attitude developing in Germany of history is what you can prove. History is what actually happened. So this is a book by Arnaldo Momigliano, who is probably I wouldn't say the most famous, but most reputable historiographers of the 20th century. This book is The Classical Foundations of Modern Historiography. And on the back here, you have quotes from Peter Green, Anthony Grafton, and Eric Gruen, 3 great scholars, and they're all praising this book to the sky. If you see Anthony Grafton's name on any work, that's a really good sign. Then you see Peter Green and Eric Gruen, and then you know that's a really good sign. Let me read off some chapter titles here. This is tremendous. Arnaldo Momigliano is one of those scholars that just illuminates on any subject they discuss. They shine the full light on it, and even if you're so confident in what you know about that subject, it's the kind of scholar that shows you something new and something you're already familiar with, and that's always amazing to feel. So the kind of essays in here there's a chapter on Persian historiography, Greek historiography, and Jewish historiography, chapter on the Herodotean and Thucydidean tradition, the rise of antiquarian research, Fabius Pictor and the origins of national history, Tacitus and the Tacitist tradition, and the origins of ecclesiastical historiography. If you're interested in ancient history and history in general, this is the kind of stuff you need on your shelf. So, okay. Here is an interesting book with one of the strangest covers I've seen. This is The Tyranny of Greece Over Germany. And this does not mean a literal tyranny, but you could say a cultural tyranny. So this is a study of the influence exercised by Greek art and poetry over the great German writers of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. So there are chapters in here on Schiller, Goethe, Lessing, Heine, Holderlin, Winkelmann. And fun fact, the more you learn about Greek history, an ionic column begins to grow out of the top of your head, apparently, because that's what's going on here. That's a stupid joke. Okay. This is history and historians in the 19th century. Just a broad overview of that very interesting subject. Here is World Historians and Their Goals, 20th Century Answers to Modernism. So the chapters in here are on, this book covers Oswald Spengler, Arnold Toynbee, Lewis Mumford, Patirim Sorokin, Christopher Dawson, I think. Yep, and then William H. McNeill. The concept of a world historians, world histories, they're inherently ambitious projects that are always, almost always, pretty much always, too big for any one historian to take on. But it's always interesting to see a historian try and do that. For example, that's why I have Toynbee on my shelf. He did a 12-volume study of history, period, history. I find tremendous ambition in historians to be always interesting, just to see the attempt that they make at something. Yeah, and the tradition of world historians is interesting to me because it starts with Polybius, who I mentioned in this bookshelf tour. He's who was a 2nd century BC Greek, who talks at length about history writing itself in his work and the need for a world history. You know, not just events concentrated in one area, but what was going on at the same time in different areas. So it's fascinating to think about. So this is R.G. Collingwood's. I want to say, I'm tempted to say famous, but is it still, do people still read this? I don't know. But this is The Idea of History, more philosophical bent to our developing idea of what history is. Here is just a work of classical scholarship. This is representative government in Greek and Roman history. This is a very interesting volume. This is Royal Correspondence in the Hellenistic Period. This here collects letters from various Seleucid rulers, Ptolemies, Antigonos, Eumenes, and it presents the Greek with a translation and immense commentary. And the subtitle of this book is A Study in Greek Epigraphy, because there's a historical value to those letters of these Hellenistic kings addressing each other, giving us great insight into Hellenistic diplomacy and government. But also the linguistic advantage, I don't say advantage, but the linguistic interest of those letters is it's not the language used is not the rhetoric of a historian or a grammarian or anything of that sort. It's the language of those letters are closer akin to the spoken language of the Hellenistic world. So it really gives good insight as to the Greek spoken by everyday people at the time, as opposed to the more, the type of language you would see from a rhetorician or something like that. So very cool, and I was very lucky to get this volume for very cheap. Here we have a book I've mentioned before. This is The Roman Revolution by Ronald Syme. I could talk for so long about this incredible book. This book is, I said earlier in the bookshelf tour, this book changed the way I looked at history. Not just Roman history, history in general. it's just staggeringly erudite. So yeah, there you got a very grim looking statue of Augustus. And so, yeah, and then next to it, I have a major, I won't say major, but a response, essentially a response to Ronald Stein. This is the last generation of the Roman Republic. The Roman Revolution is more of a aristocratic viewpoint of the transition from republic to empire. Mostly concerned, it's a falls under the title of prosopography. It looks at the personal interests of the powerful people involved in that process. This book looks at that same period, but from the perspective of the people. And this is Eric Gruen, the scholar I mentioned, who's quoted on the back of the Mamigliano volume. And speaking of Mamigliano, I have two more volumes from him here. This is Essays in Ancient and Modern Historiography, with a new foreword by Anthony Grafton. And then we have Studies on Modern Scholarship. And there's an essay in here from Mamigliano on the Roman Revolution. If you've read the Roman Revolution, read Mamigliano's essay on it. Here we have Karl Darling-Buck. This is his book on the Greek dialects, which is totally beyond me right now, just because it's very high-level linguistic analysis. Okay, here we have, this is a history of classical scholarship by J.E. Sandys. I mentioned J.E. Sandys earlier in this video because he translated the Loeb Classical Library edition of Pindar, and he did this massive work, the history of classical scholarship. This is one of 3 histories of classical scholarship that exist. The other 2, one was by a German scholar named Wilamowitz. His history of classical scholarship translated into English is like 150 pages. And this is like, I don't know, in total like over 1,000. And then there was later on in the mid-20th century. This is early 20th century. Wilamowitz was like 10 years after this or something like that. And then Rudolf Pfeiffer did a mid-20th century history of classical scholarship in 2 volumes, one from the beginnings to the end of the Hellenistic Age, and then the second one was from 1300 to 1850. I've not yet read those, but I'll eventually get to them. So yeah, but this is a really good volume. This is better as a compendium of fact, if anything. It's less so on the narrative, less narrative strength, and more good as just a compendium. So yeah, good stuff. I had to pay. This cost me a little bit of money because I was after it for a while, and I finally bit the bullet. So yeah. The 12th century Renaissance by Charles Homer Haskins. Not many books in English on the 12th century Renaissance. I only know of one other. It's like 800 pages. It's called Renaissance and Renewal in the 12th Century. It's got that screen cover. I used to have a copy of it. I don't anymore. But yeah, very interesting time period, and this is the standard work on the subject, as far as I'm aware of. Here we have Helen Waddell. This is her book, The Wandering Scholars. And then her translation that really goes with that volume. This is Medieval Latin Lyrics, translated by Helen Waddell. I don't know how easy it is to come by this Penguin volume. I think they only printed it in this edition, not in the standard black spine at any point. This was published in, I think, the 1960s. Yeah, 1964, this edition. I got very lucky to get it in nearly perfect condition. Thank you, Brattle Bookshop. Yeah, so Helen Waddell, her famous study of the wandering poets. Here is just like a general work of Greek history. This is A History of the Greek City-States by Raphael Seeley, 700 to 338 BC. Just a general overview. Corinth, Megara, Argos, stuff like that. Here's a book I had to grapple with a bit because, sorry, there's my watch again. This is The Greco-Persian Wars by Peter Green. A great book on this particular event, or series of events, I should say. Peter Green, the first time I read this book, Peter Green kind of rubbed me the wrong way. He's one of those authors that I never mind. I usually never mind when an author hauls in a word from a different language to elucidate a point. You know, I've Google Translate. It takes me 2 seconds to translate something if it's taken from German or Italian or something like that. But there's sometimes I'll encounter an author who does that, and I think to myself, you're showing off. There's a perfectly equivalent English word, and you've hauled in another word, a word from a different language to show off. That was sort of my impression when I read this book for the first time. And this is one of the first books about Greek history that I ever read. So it was my first sort of foray into scholarship, or reading scholarship. And I read it again recently after a few years, and I was blown away at how great of a job Peter Green does. He's a terrific scholar. I sort of put aside my my grievances and just bask in his talent as a scholar. So, great book on the subject. Great book. If you've read Herodotus, read this. If you haven't read Herodotus, also read this. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to try and pick up the pace a little bit because I am moving way too slow through this bookshelf tour. Here is The Horse, the Wheel, and Language, How Bronze Age Riders from the Eurasian Steppe Shaped the Modern World. Book about the Proto-Indo-Europeans, or an archaeological look at the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and the Yamnaya culture. This is a textbook. This is Indo-European Language and Culture. One of a project I hope to undertake at some point soon is to work through all the exercises in here. I really want to do that. Okay. This is Calvert Watkins' book, How to Kill a Dragon, which looks at the serpent-slaying, dragon-slaying myth that's prevalent throughout all Indo-European mythologies. So yeah, a book still very much above my pay grade. This is Jan Pavel's Comparative Mythology. Here we go. And we have this. I mentioned the scholar earlier. This is M.L. West. This is Indo-European Poetry and Myth. Okay, and then here we got some of the oldest texts from ancient Egypt. This is the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom. Let's see here. Let's see. Does it show? Huzzah! Here is a great anthology. This is Before the Muses, an anthology of Akkadian literature. Huge, thick thing. If you have any interest in the ancient Near East, get this. Get this. This is, and it's organized by mythology, it's organized by period, but it organizes, collects together religious rites, hymns, rituals, works of literature, poetry. So yeah, this is a volume to have. This is a book I think I've showed before. This is Documents in Mycenaean Greek. This is about the Linear B script. It's the landmark study in the Linear B script. Here is a massive work and a book I'm very, very, very glad to have. This is the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the World's Ancient Languages. I have to hold it on my shoulder. It's that heavy. Yeah. This took me a while to find. I had to be very patient for this, but I eventually got it. This is an interesting book. I discovered this in a bibliography of I read this book called The Riddle of the Labyrinth, which is about the decipherment of the Linear B script. And it talks about the achievements of not only Michael Ventris, who gets most of who's credited as being the person who cracked Linear B, but also illuminates the immense work done by a woman named Alice Kober. Really enjoyed reading that book a few years ago, and I discovered this book in the bibliography, Archaeological Decipherment, a handbook. This was written in the 1970s. Meant to be a handbook for archaeologists and linguists out in the field, encountering new scripts, like, for example, scripts that we haven't cracked yet, like Linear A, Etruscan, the Indus Valley script. There's another one for you. So yeah, this is a book about cracking unknown languages, or languages we can't yet understand. I feel like this would be of great interest to a lot of people watching this, so yeah, see if you can find this. I had to search for a while. I don't know how, definitely not in print now, so it might take some searching, but really interesting. The next book here is another book I feel like would be interesting to a lot of people. This is The Story of Decipherment. And the subtitles, From Egyptian Hieroglyphics to Linear B. Just a history of all the scripts that we have discovered, scripts and languages we've discovered, and how the ones that have been broken and understood, how was that done? So it's just a general history about this. And what's great about this volume is that there's lots of illustrations, pictures in here, tables. Let's see. You get stuff like that. There you go. Let's see what else. See, this is what I'm talking about. It's a great volume. Yeah, great stuff. Let's see here. This is a book on how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics. Here we have this work. This is Archaic Roman Religion by Georges Dumézil. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name fully right, but he was a very notable French Indo-European scholar, and some of his works have been translated into English. He wrote a work, I think it's his most famous work. I don't know if it's been translated to English, but it's called like Jupiter, Mars, Quirinus. I don't know if, has that been translated in English yet? I don't know. Yeah, I was very lucky to just find this by happenstance in a used bookstore. And then I also found this in a used bookstore, just by happenstance. This is Camillus. What's the subtitle again? It's a study of Indo-European religion as Roman history. So he looks at the figure of Camillus, who was, I have to recall what I read in the Plutarch biography. Sorry, I keep adjusting myself. I'm kneeling on the floor. Camillus was, when the Romans, when the Gauls took Rome in 390 BC, he was declared dictator, which was a provision in the Roman constitution. In times of great crisis, they would declare a dictator to lead the city, and then there would be like sort of a second in command called Master of Horse. And Camillus, if I remember, my memory's hazy. The last time I read Plutarch's Camillus biography was two and a half years ago. Camillus was the man who led the Romans to take back Rome from the Gauls, which occurred around 390 BC. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, Rome burned. Probably a lot of the records that existed up until that point did as well. So it's a very hazy period of Roman history. There's a lot of mythology involved, at least in what survived. So this is just one of his studies that got translated into English. Great cover. Here is a great Penguin volume. Came from a whole series of books they did. This is Homer in English. Now you have Odysseus slaying the suitors. This is a collection of snippets of translations of Homer into English, ranging from, who's the first person here? I think Chaucer's first here, right? Yeah, Geoffrey Chaucer, ranging from Geoffrey Chaucer to like the modern day. And it's edited and introduced by George Steiner. Again, as someone I mentioned before in this tour, a great literary critic. A great literary critic put this together, and it's just a compilation of Homer rendered into English. This is a Penguin classic to have if you're a fan of Homer, and you see this, buy it. It's not in print anymore, and this series did like Juvenal in English, Seneca in English, Virgil in English. They even did Dante in English. They did Petrarch in English as well. They also did the Psalms in English. They did Baudelaire in English. They did a bunch of stuff. Just taking a classic work or author who's been translated many times and just compiling them to give you snippets of translations. It's a great way to choose a translation of a particular author. So, yeah. But also, it's not just translations of Homer. Like, in here is, like, John Keats, for example, John Keats's poem about Homer on first looking into Chapman's Homer. That makes it into here as well, if I remember correctly. So it's not just strictly translations. It could be poems about that author as well. This is Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe. Ooh, very scary cover there. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to make haste here. This is, I never know how to pronounce this guy's name. Is it Mircea Eliade? This is The Myth of the Eternal Return, Cosmos and History. This author did the introduction to the archaic Roman religion volumes I just showed up. He also published extensively on religion in general. He did a book called A History of Religious Ideas, which was in 3 volumes. I really want to read that book. He also did a book on shamanism, and some other stuff I'm blanking on. This is the only book I have from him. But yeah. This is a book from a Swedish scholar, an Oxford paperback. This is Heroic Song and Heroic Legend. Just looks at various heroic epics, ranging from like Homer to Beowulf. This is interesting. This is a curiosity I found in a used bookstore. I'll first show it up. This is the Penguin Book of Lost Worlds. Just 2 volumes. And it first covers like the ancient Near East and Egypt. And then this covers more like the Mycenaean era. Mycenaean Greece. This was originally, I believe, meant to be 7 volumes. But I think only the first 2 were ever published. I could not find any other information online. The Penguin Book of Lost Worlds describes in text and pictures 7 separate worlds which have been recovered for history. But the remaining 5 volumes, I don't think they ever came out. Unless I didn't do enough research. I tried for a good solid afternoon to see what I could find out about the volumes beyond this, because I wanted to complete it. I was like, oh, I want the full set. I want all 7 volumes. But I don't think it was ever done. But I'd love to be proven wrong, because I'd love a 7-volume set called The Penguin Book of Lost Worlds. So, yeah. So here we have John Julius Norwich's History of Byzantium. He wrote a history of Venice that I really want to read. I love Venice. I don't have many books on Venice, but I can very easily see myself creating like a Venice bookshelf, because when I first visited there, it left a huge impact on me. I think on the top books I want to get for my collection, I would say the top is probably John Ruskin's The Stones of Venice. I am actively seeking out a copy, a good edition of that. Anyway, this is Snorri Sturluson again. This is his Heimskringla, The History of the Kings of Norway. Um, we saw Snorri earlier in the bookshelf tour because he wrote his more famous book is called the Prose Edda. But he was a medieval historian of Iceland who did the world a great favor by compiling a lot of Norse mythology. And then also he wrote a history of the kings of Norway. And the first chapter in here, it's sort of like a collection of sagas, if anything. And the first chapter here is called the Ynglinga Saga, which is very mythological. It has some very, it has to do a lot with Odin. It's been a while since I've read the Heimskringla, probably like a year and a half. So, but the Ynglinga Saga is just worth reading on its own because there's so many interesting, I won't say tidbits, but it's one of our few sources of Norse myth also. So here is this translation is by Lee Hollander, and then he also translated this, the Saga of the Jomsvikings. So, okay, continuing on. We've gone from medieval Iceland to Captain John Smith. This is the three worlds of Captain John Smith. The worlds of a soldier, slave, and fugitive over the face of Europe, a wise, patient, and energetic founder of a new world, and an adventurer home in England to tell the truth about his other worlds. Those are the three worlds of Captain John Smith. This book I found recently, seemed interesting, and it was cheap. This is Decisive Battles, Their Influence Upon History and Civilization. Yeah, I can't say much about it, just got it. This is Karl von Clausewitz. This is the standard edition in English, as far as I'm aware of. This is On War. Clausewitz was a Prussian officer, and his book here, On War, is probably the most extensive treatise on the phenomenon of war that's ever been written. This is a book I got mainly because Samuel Eliot Morison had something to do with it, but it was co-authored. And this is The Growth of the American Republic. Massive 2-volume set. Morison wrote also a work called The Oxford History of the United States. No, The Oxford History of the American People, which I want. I want that to combine with this. So, a history of the people and the Republic, with the writings with Samuel Eliot Morison, which are fantastic. This is a interesting book that I've had for a while, and it's not yet something I know enough about the times to really read and comprehend. But I got it because it had an influence on, well, Ronald Syme denied it, I believe, but it was written right around the time that Syme was a university student, I believe. I can't remember what year was this published. Published in 1929, and the Roman Revolution was published in, I think, 1936. But this is a work of prosopography as well, like the Roman Revolution. It looks at the interests of powerful individuals. This is The Structure of Politics at the Accession of George III by Louis B. Namier. I was lucky enough to find the 2-volume first edition for very cheap. But I've not yet read this work because I don't know enough about 18th century, the 18th century English Parliament. So I haven't made an attempt at this yet. I really need to brush up on English history of that time period before I'm going to take this on. But the reason why I have it is because of it's a type of history, prosopography, and it had an influence on a work that I very much admire. Okay, so down here, I gotta be faster. This is taking way too long. This is marginalia, readers writing in their books. If you're someone who writes in the margins of their books, I recommend this. And if you're someone who doesn't, I'd recommend this to convince you to start doing that. Another book I've shown on this channel before, this is George Steiner's After Babel, Aspects of Language and Translation. Yeah, this is the critical I keep mentioning in this bookshelf tour, George Steiner. Well worth reading. We here have Robert Burton, his Anatomy of Melancholy. I had a paperback version of this for a while, but then I eventually came across this edition, which I really wanted because this is the edition that I would read in the library in college. So yeah, I replaced my old copies and got this. This was sometime in the last 6 months I got this. So down here we have T.E. Lawrence again. This is his book on Crusader architecture. This is Crusader Castles, published by the Folio Society. We have the Robert Fitzgerald Iliad, which is my favorite translation. I don't currently have a copy of his Odyssey, which I need to get. I need to get that one again. Here is Selected Letters and Journals of Lord Byron. I don't know if I really need this after I got that book, Byron, a self-portrait in his own words, because that has a lot of, it's predominantly just letters and journals, so I mean, I don't know if I need to hold on to this. This is a famous literary study. This is Randall Jarrell's Poetry in the Age. I'm speeding along here. I'm trying to go faster. Another translation of the Kalevala, the Finnish epic. This is from the Everman's Library with the subtitle The Land of Heroes. There you go. The poems of W.B. Yeats. Here we have more Longfellow. This is the Library of America edition. I really wish they just did all of the poetry of Longfellow. I don't know why they did a lot, like basically all the minor poems, but then they did selections. I don't think they did all the Tales of a Wayside Inn. They did all of the Song of Hiawatha. If I remember correctly, they took snippets of some of his larger works. I swear to God they did they? Yeah. So they didn't, I really wish they had done all of the poems of Longfellow. I don't know why they did it this way. Okay. Here we have 3 translations of one of my favorite poets. This is Constantine Cavafy. This is the Oxford World Classics edition of his poems. Then we have the Ray Delvin translation with an introduction by W.H. Auden. A very great introduction. And then the more recent, I think, award-winning, this is the Daniel Mendelsohn edition, which also includes the unfinished poems as well. Daniel Mendelsohn also just recently came out with a translation of the Odyssey, which I might check out. Here we have one of my absolute favorites writers, period. Someone whose poetry I have many lines committed to heart, and I return to this author all the time. This is Edna St. Vincent Millay. This is her collected poems. If I were to be dramatic, I would say I could not live without her poetry. That would be me being very dramatic. This is another great anthology. This is the New Oxford Book of American Verse. I love these Oxford books, these Oxford anthologies of poetry. Okay, so continuing on, we have this is Les Morts d'Arthur. This is Sir Thomas Malory. This is my edition is very tanned. This is This is a really good addition to have of Mallory because it retains the original English. It's not a modernized spelling. I don't know if you can see that. So yeah, this is my go-to Mallory. Let's see here. Continuing on, we have the Nibelungenlied. This is here printed as the Song of the Nibelungs, the High German epic. We got some Tolstoy. So we have Anna Karenina, the Oxford World Classics edition. We have the Signet War and Peace. There you go. I really like this edition. Here we have the Jungle Books. I love the Jungle Books. This is Hermann Broch. This is The Death of Virgil. I plan on reading this very soon because I started the year, for some reason I just felt compelled to just read through all of Virgil. So all January was me reading about Virgil, reading all of his poetry and about him. I've been meaning to read The Death of Virgil for the longest time. I've had this book I picked it up a while ago, and it's been sitting on my shelf. And it's high up on my list of books to read. This is a really good anthology. This is from Hackett Classics. This is Greek lyrics from the Lyric Age of Greece, the 7th and 6th centuries. So you get Sappho, you get Solon, Alcaeus, things like that. Here is one of my favorite pieces of writing ever. I'm due for a reread. This is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I've had a few editions of this, but I've eventually found this old like Penguin Mass Market, and I really liked it, so this is the one I stick with. We've had a strain of Virginia Woolf here. This is the first and second Common Reader. Oh, jeez. There's a hardcover edition that I think is it just called the Common Reader? I really want a one-volume edition, one-volume like hardcover of the Common Reader. But these serve me well. Let's see here. We got this from the Hogarth Press. This is A Writer's Diary. Can you see that? This is Virginia Woolf's a snippet, extracts from Virginia's diary, where she talks about her writing. And it's currently in print in a paperback, which I had for a while, and then I found this hardcover for very cheap, and I was really happy, especially because it's from the Hogarth Press. Let's see. Here we have some Kafka. Currently, this is the only Kafka I have. I had a copy of the diaries. I got rid of it. I don't know why. I should get that back. Okay, back to Virginia Woolf. We have Mrs. Dalloway, and we have To the Lighthouse. Here we have Vasily Grossman. This is the Everyman's Library edition of Life and Fate, which they published, I think, in 2023. I'm really glad that they did this in this hardcover. I love the Everyman's Library series. Here we have, I don't like having multiple copies of books unless it's something I really like. In the case of Emerson, I really want to have the Library of America volume, but I also want to have that hardcover set I'm currently collecting. But in the case of this book, this is one of my favorite novels. My favorite novel is Moby Dick. Well, my favorite book is Moby Dick. And this is my second favorite novel. This is The Recognitions of William Gaddis. I have this black spine paperback. There we go. And then I have the older Penguin 20th Century Classics edition. That is a monk from the Portinari Altarpiece by Hugo van der Goes. If you're in Florence, this painting is in the room immediately after Botticelli's. Oh my God! Why am I blanking here? The Birth of Venus. Why did I blank on the the Birth of Venus? The Portinari altarpiece is in the next room. So keep it if you're ever in the Uffizi Gallery. Keep an eye out for this. When I saw this for the first time, I was so excited because I was like, "That's from the Recognitions cover." Yeah, and I really like this cover as well. I feel like they both. I mean, the Wyatt in the book is obsessed with the Flemish painters, so it makes sense to have a Flemish painter on the cover. But also, given this book's, what this book has to say about, more modern art or mechanical reproduction of art, I feel like this is also a fitting cover. So I really don't know which edition to keep, because I can see myself reading both, and I'm a fan of both covers, and so I guess I'll just keep both. Okay. This is another William Gaddis book. This is J.R. He wrote this 20 years after the Recognitions, and it was finally the book that gave him the recognition he deserved. Haha, pun intended, I guess. And then here we have the Maxims of La Rochefoucauld, just his old Penguin edition. And then I have this Penguin Penguin Modern Classic. This is a novel in praise of older women. Okay, the next book I have here is something I deeply cherish. I feel very lucky that I have it because it's not easy to come by. This is a biography of the German naturalist George Wilhelm Steller. And the subtitle of the book is Pioneer of Alaskan Natural History. Let me show you this real quick. There you go. This was published in 1936 by Cambridge University Press. Steller took part in the Great Northern Expedition, which resulted in the Russians discovering Alaska. And the captain of that expedition was Vitus Bering, whom the Bering Sea is named after. And I came to know of Steller not because I was interested initially in the Bering expedition, but because there is a particular extinct animal named after Steller. That animal is Steller's sea cow, which was an animal that was a member of the Sirenian family. Think manatees and dugongs. So that animal bears Steller's name because he is the first person to write about it, to document it. And within 27 years of that animal being discovered, it was hunted to extinction. This gentle giant of the ocean that lived along the Commander Islands between Russia and Alaska. So that's how I came to know. I first learned of that animal, the Steller sea cow, and then I was like, well, who's Steller? And I began to look into him and the role he played in the Great Northern Expedition, and I was utterly fascinated. Again, he was a naturalist and a physician, and so he diligently recorded what he saw. He had a journal, and the Steller sea cow is named after him because he wrote a book a work titled On the Beasts of the Sea, in which he first documents this gigantic manatee, essentially. There's also a bird named after him, the Steller's jay, and a few other things I'm trying to remember. Whenever Steller was able to convince Bering to let him, spend, I think, up to 10 hours on land so that he could document what he saw, including flora and fauna and whatnot. And unfortunately, most of the crew members on the expedition succumbed to scurvy, including Bering himself. He died on an island which is now named Bering Island. That's where he died. Steller did not suffer scurvy. He understood the role that vitamin C had in keeping scurvy away. And though he tried to cure the crew, it was Steller, along with being this naturalist, possessed the ability to save the crew. But the commanding officers of the expedition dismissed him. And so Steller was able to heal some of them, but Steller was able to keep scurvy away from himself because he would, whenever they would touch down, he would, eat berries or whatever foliage, that was edible. And so anyway, he is an utterly fascinating figure to me. And so I have this biography, which I was very lucky to find. And I have a few other volumes here related to this. So earlier in the bookshelf tour, we saw this publication, or this press, the American Geographical Society Research Series. We saw a volume titled The Frame of the Ancient Greek Maps. We saw another volume titled Legendary Islands of the Atlantic. This is also from this series. This is Bering's Voyages. And so Volume 1 has logbooks from the Great Northern Expedition. And then Volume 2 has George Wilhelm Steller's journal from the expedition. So this gives you some incredible primary source documents for the Great Northern Expedition. So this is fantastic. And this was the first volume, so that's number 1 and number 2. So this is they kicked off this research series with these volumes. So yeah, I'm really glad to have these. And then in the 90s, this is from Stanford University Press, there's a new translation of Steller's journal, Journal of a Voyage with Bering, 1741 to 1742. So I have this, and then this is a great book. It's so riveting. This is Where the Sea Breaks Its Back, the epic story of the early naturalist George Steller and the Russian exploration of Alaska. So I highly recommend this book. It's fantastic. And then I have this book here. This is just Bering, the Russian discovery of Alaska. And then finally on this theme, this is After Nature by W.G. Sebald, who most people know from The Rings of Saturn or The Emigrants. But he wrote this. He has this little collection of poetry, and it's 3 narrative poems. And the second poem in here is from the perspective of George Wilhelm Steller. So yeah, I intend on making a video on Steller. So I'll probably be talking about him more in the future. Okay, here we have some Darwin. We have The Voyage of the Beagle. And then we have The Origin of Species. I've had many copies of The Origin of Species, but this one is absolutely my favorite. What is this illustration again? This is Henry de la Bechet's Duria Antiquor, with ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, pterodactyls, and other extinct animals obeying the, quote, law of nature which bids all to eat and to be eaten in their turn. Yeah, I really like this. I love those old erroneous illustrations of dinosaurs and whatnot. Those are always fun to look at. And then I have a book I've shown before. This is The Malay Archipelago by Sir Alfred. Is it Sir? Was he knighted? I can't remember. Why do I have this inclination to say Sir? By Alfred Russel Wallace, who, at the same time as Darwin, had conceived the idea of evolution. And then I have this book, Darwin's Century, Evolution and the Men Who Discovered It, by Loren Eiseley. There he is. 2 things. I recently saw some videos on YouTube talking about reading projects, and one of my reading projects is I want to do a complete examination of Darwin, his life and times. So I want to read everything he ever wrote and all the stuff that ever influenced him, and read people surrounding, in his family and friends who wrote about him, and the biography, the whatever the great biographies are of him. I really want to do that. Darwin fascinates me. And another note is that Lauren Isley, I'm really fascinated him as an author as well. The Library of America did a 2-volume set of his works, a box set. His writings on the cosmos and evolution and related subjects to that. Those are 2 big subjects. So yeah, anyway. Okay. Now we are getting into Antarctic exploration. So we have what some consider to be the greatest travel book ever written. This is The Worst Journey in the World by Apsley Cherry Gerard. Here we have the journals of Robert Falcon Scott. And then we have this is Roald Amundson's The South Pole, who was far more successful than Robert Falcon Scott. This is the man who reached the North Pole first. And he did it absolutely seamlessly compared to what happened with Robert Falcon Scott's expedition. And then here's a book. This is Scott and Amundsen, The Race to the South Pole by Roland Huntford. This is reprinted nowadays, I think by the Modern Library as The Last Place on Earth. And then we have Shackleton, South, The Endurance Expedition. I don't currently have a copy of The Heart of the Antarctic, but I'm looking for that. We go from the Bering Expedition to evolution to Antarctic exploration to Torquato Tasso. This is the Jerusalem Delivered, the Liberation of Jerusalem. This is the Joseph Tusciani translation. I don't think this translation is in print nowadays, but Joseph Tusciani translated the Renaissance epic Morgante, which, if I'm not he translated Morgante, and I think that's in print still. But he also did Tasso. So, and I didn't even know about this edition. I found this in a used bookstore, and I don't think I've ever seen a copy of this particular edition online, so I guess I'm really lucky to have this. So yeah. Here we have the poetical works of John Keats from Oxford University Press. I love this dust jacket. You have a frieze there. Okay, continuing on. Okay, so next we have Henry Adams' Mont Saint-Michel and Chartres. And then I also have his his History of the United States during the administration of Thomas Jefferson, administrations 1 and 2, and then History of the United States during the administrations of James Madison. Ironically, I don't have a copy of The Education of Henry Adams, which is a book I love. I read it last year. His study of multiplicity. 2 words come to mind when I think of The Education of Henry Adams. Strange, masterpiece. I don't know why I did this. But yeah, I have... Basically, I'd have all the Adams I want once I get another copy of The Education. I don't really have any interest in his 2 novels, Esther and Democracy, but I'm interested in all of the Adams. All of the Adamses, I mean, at least John Quincy, and Henry. Charles Francis, I need to look more into. I don't really know much about him, other than him being the son of John Quincy and the father of Henry. I think he wrote a biography of Richard Henry Donna Jr. I'd be interested in that. Speaking of Adamses, another book I'm on the lookout for, I'll probably have to buy it new. The Library of America did a 2-volume box set of the Diaries of John Quincy Adams. So that's something I really want. But anyway, here we've hit a strain of de Tocqueville. This is Tocqueville in America. It's massive work from 1938, I think. Was it 1938? Yeah, 1938. There's that. And then I have The Old Regime and the Revolution. And then I have Hugh Brogan's biography of Alexis de Tocqueville. Here we have James Burnham's The Machiavellians, The Defenders of Freedom. Here we have 2 essays on the Iliad. This is War in the Iliad, published by NYRB. And then we've hit one of my favorite writers. This is Hannah Arendt. This is the new Library of America, The Origins of Totalitarianism, which is a book I've been meaning to reread. I'm curious to see what is in this expanded edition. What else is included? I've not dug deep into this volume yet. I've mentioned The Origins of Totalitarianism on this channel before. I read it a few years ago, and it's Hannah Arendt's mind is just, it's staggering how brilliant she was. Here is The Human Condition. I believe the subtitle is A Study of the Central Dilemmas Facing Modern Man. This is an old Anchor Doubleday paperback. I believe W.H. Auden read this book, and then I think he tried to propose to Hannah Arendt, which is kind of funny. Someone fact-check me on that. Is that true? And then Eichmann in Jerusalem, her very famous reporting of the trial of Adolf Eichmann. I want to give back another copy. I had it for a while. I read it, loved it, and then for some reason I got rid of it. Her collection of essays called Beyond Past and Future. And then I want to read her her book, The Life of the Mind. I want to read that book. I know it was unfinished at the time of her death, but I still am interested in it. And then this book I've shown on this channel before, this is a biography of Hannah Arendt. This is For the Love of the World. There's the young Hannah. Here we have Rebecca West. This is Black Lamb and Grey Falcon, her tour through Yugoslavia on the eve of World War II. We encounter Thomas Carlyle yet again. Here is Sartor Resartus, another edition of paperback. And then here is the French Revolution. So, yeah. Here I have a mass market paperback. This is Robert Little's biography of Cavafy, which I just was very excited to learn that another biography of Cavafy is coming out this year. So I'll probably get that. Because again, Cavafy is one of my favorite poets. And then here I have this paperback edition of The Seven Pillars of Wisdom, this old Penguin edition. Okay, so I have here, this is just an exercise book for Lingua Latina, the Latin book, textbook. Here I have this book from Phaedon Press. This is Marvels of Ancient Rome. Let me show you this. There you go. Here we have Alan Mandelbaum's translation of the Aeneid. This is my favorite translation of Virgil, or the Aeneid, I should say. Here is Thor Heyerdahl's The Kon-Tiki Expedition. And this has amazing, amazing illustrations. Let's see here. There you go. There's some... let's see, 1 second. Look at this. There's one particular illustration I love. Well, this one's great. Oh my god, I just love that. Where where is this? There's one particular one I truly adore. One second. Almost got it. Almost there, almost there. Oh yeah, here it is. If you're interested in this work, find this edition. I doubt if there's anything better than this one out there. I have another paperback of Greek architecture. Or I have another edition of Greek architecture, this time a paperback by A.W. Lawrence. I need to get rid of that. This is a book, this is The Sound of Greek. This is Studies in the Greek Theory and Practice of Euphony. Which has this in the back here is, give me a moment. One moment. You can hear the author put his theory to the test. I believe somebody uploaded this to YouTube. The audio from this is on YouTube. I've listened to it a few times. Oh, it's not going in. Okay. Here's an interesting book. This is from the Oak Knoll Press. This is called Following Pausanias. Pretty big book. This is about the influence that the writings of the 2nd century AD traveler Pausanias had on later ages. We saw in this bookshelf tour Pausanias. I have the 2-volume Penguin edition. Let's see here. This has got the text and plenty of illustrations. This is the only book I have from the Oak Knoll Press. I know there's some booktubers out there with a few more than I do. Here's just a book on this is the Riace bronzes, which really just has there's like an introductory essay and just pictures. But it's still cool. It was a gift that I got. This is the Rime of the Ancient Mariner with the Gustave Doré illustrations. Really glad to have this. Let's see, there's a really good one here I like. One of my favorite illustrations is when the albatross first shows up. Here is the Doré illustrations for Dante's Divine Comedy. Ooh. And then here we have 2 books about Winslow Homer, who is my favorite American painter. Here we have Winslow Homer, His Art, His Light, His Landscapes. And then we have Winslow Homer, American Artist, His World, and His Work. Yeah, I adore Winslow Homer. I've seen many of his I've been lucky enough to see many of his paintings in person, and they're just all incredible. Okay, we have more Pushkin. This is a modern library giant. I justify having this edition in addition to all the other Pushkin that I have because this edition has one of my favorite translators of Pushkin, or at least of his poetry. It's a woman named Babette Deutsch. I really like her translations of Pushkin's poetry. Here we have just the Penguin major works of Sir Thomas Browne. There's an Oxford Standard Authors edition of Sir Thomas Browne that I also should get. Here is Notes on Life and Letters by Joseph Conrad. Here is a book by George Steiner. This is In Bluebeard's Castle. Some notes towards the redefinition of culture. Just a slim little book. A copy of Moby Dick. This is not the last copy of Moby Dick we'll encounter. There's one more behind me. Okay, this next book, it's on a very interesting subject. I became interested in this subject when I learned about the fate of Priam's treasure after the Second World War. Priam's treasure is the name of a collection of gold artifacts, jewelry, that was found by Heinrich Schliemann um, uh, from his excavations at a place called Hisarlik in western Turkey in the 19th century. Hisarlik is where many believe to be the historical equivalent of the legendary Troy was. And so it's called Priam's treasure because it's named after King Priam from the Iliad, the father of Hector. And after the Battle of Berlin, where that treasure was located, the treasure disappeared. And for about 50 years, it was unknown to the world where it ended up. The likely conjecture was that the Red Army took it. And then there was rumors that, it was bought by some American, a very wealthy American, or it was melted down by the Nazis or something like that. But then it resurfaced in 1994 in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. And so that led me to wonder about, what happened to all the, works of art leading up to, during, and after the Second World War. And I found this book on the subject, which was exactly what I was looking for. This won the National Book Critics winner Circle Award. National Book Critics Circle Award winner. This is The Rape of Europa, the fate of Europe's treasures in the Third Reich and the Second World War. This was also turned into a documentary, I believe. I've been meaning to watch that, but yeah, this was exactly the book I was looking for on the subject of the treasures of Europe. But this next book here is, I just found this in a used bookstore. This is A Universal History of the Destruction of Books from Ancient Sumer to Modern Iraq. This is by Fernando Baez, who I believe was like the librarian, the director of Venezuela's National Library. And he's a world authority on the history of libraries. And it's even got praise from Noam Chomsky there, too. Cool. Okay, we are approaching the end of this bookshelf tour. I cannot believe how long this took. Okay, last shelf. Here we go. What we have here is the Conversations of John Gardner. I'm a huge fan of John Gardner, and so this is an essential book for me. And then here's a book. Here's my favorite book from him. This is On Moral Fiction. This is a great book to read, especially if you want to write. Here is Malcolm Lowry's Under the Volcano. Here is an interesting book. This is a 1971 reprint of a book from 1875. This particular edition I have, it's an ex-library copy, is one of 250 copies, I think, or something like that. Yeah. There you go. This book is one of 250 copies. But the work itself, this edition is 250 copies, but the text is, you can find it online for free. And this book is The History of the Transition of Ancient Books to Modern Times. And then there's a secondary work in it titled Together with the Process of Historical Proof, or a concise account of the means by which the genuineness of ancient literature generally and the authenticity of historical works especially are ascertained, including incidental remarks upon the relative strength of the evidence usually adduced in behalf of the Holy Scriptures. If you're interested in this subject, don't start here. Read a book called Scribes and Scholars, a guide to the transmission of what's the subtitle? A Guide to the Transmission of Ancient... I'll put the book on the screen. If you're interested in the transmission of ancient texts, read that book. If you're interested in, I guess, curiosities, read this. It's not high tier scholarship. Let's put it that way. Here we have this is the Xenophon's Hellenica in the Loeb Classical Library, which they did in 2 volumes. Here we have a very interesting book or edition. This is, yeah. So this is in part 2 of this bookshelf tour, I showed a book called The Hellenica Oxyrhynchia, and I mentioned that's a work of Greek history which we don't know the author. There's a few candidates. This book publishes, so this is the Hellenica Oxyrhynchia with the fragments of Theopompus and Cratippus, who are 2 candidates for being the historian of that work, the Hellenic Oxyrhynchia. So this is just the Greek text of the fragments of that historical work, and then additionally the fragments of those historians that we know are by those historians. So yeah, just Greek, no translation. Here we have a volume. This is just minor of Loeb Classical Library. It's just minor Attic orators. There's a second volume to this that I don't have. Here we have Virgil's Georgics in the award-winning David Ferry translation. I believe this won many awards. Here we have John Chadwick's book on the decipherment of Linear B, just a slim book. Here we have some prose from the German poet Heinrich Heine with a Caspar David Friedrich painting on the cover. I don't currently have any of Heine's poetry, which I want to fix. Here we have another German. I should preface this by saying my interest in this author is predominantly for his remarks on Greek antiquity. This is Friedrich Nietzsche, and this is we have Beyond Good and Evil, on the genealogy of morals. We have Thus Spoke Zarathustra. We have The Will to Power. And then we have Ecce Homo. So yeah, let's see here. We have this mentor book. This is The Age of Reconnaissance. Just a book about European exploration and the Renaissance and after. This is another book by George Steiner. This is The Death of Tragedy, which had inspired John Gardner to write on moral fiction. Here's a very interesting volume that I'm glad to have. This is he would be classified with the metaphysical poets. This is Thomas Traherne, and this is Poems, Centuries, and Three Thanksgivings. This is from Oxford University Press, and this is from their. They did a lot of many authors and editions that look like this. These hardcovers with these nice dust jackets. They do Shelley, Coleridge, Byron. Then they do authors like John Bunyan. They did The Life of Samuel Johnson in these types of editions. But they did Thomas Traherne, and I've been looking for this edition for a while because Thomas Traherne fascinated me. I discovered him through poetry anthologies. And I read a remark from C.S. Lewis that the book of poetry titled Centuries, C.S. Lewis, I recall him saying, I'd have to find I don't know where I found that quote, but he said, it is almost the most perfect book in English, the work called Centuries. But my edition is a little bit special because it was owned by the literary critic Christopher Ricks. See C.B. Ricks there? He, among other things, he edited the third Oxford Book of English Verse, which I ironically do not have a copy of. Yeah, I'd like to think that when he made that anthology, he used this exact edition. Who knows? Here we have a work that's, this is an old Penguin classic. They only ever did it for a short period of time. They never did it in like the normal mass, or the trade paperbacks. This is a mass market paperback of a work published in the 18th century, and it's a very important work for the history of piracy. This is published in Holland. This is Exquemelin's The Buccaneers of America, about the privateers and pirates in the Caribbean in the 17th century. So yeah, very important for any fans of the history of piracy. I'd recommend to get that if they can find it. This is the complete novels of Flann O'Brien. I'm only really interested in At Swim Two Birds. Here's an edition of The Lord of the Rings that I had to wait a bit to find. I knew I wanted this edition, and it took me a little while to get it. This is the one-volume edition that was published with at the same time as the animated film, I believe from 1977. There you can see some Nazgul in the Shire. I really wanted a one-volume Lord of the Rings because for some reason we just publish it in 3 volumes, even though it's one work. And I was looking through different covers online. I saw this. I was like, yep, that's the one. That's the one I want. Eventually I found it. It was in terrible condition, and you can see that gloss there. You can see the light reflecting off of it. It's because I had to repair this with a packaging tape. So, because it was absolutely falling apart, but now it's invincible. Fortunately, this is the only Tolkien I have. I don't currently have the Silmarillion, which might seem a little egregious, but I kind of prefer the Silmarillion to the Lord of the Rings. I hope that isn't offensive anyway, but I love the Silmarillion. I love the Lord of the Rings. I mean, how could I not? But I love the Silmarillion, and I don't have a copy. Here we have Mary Reynolds, The King Must Die. That's unfortunately the only Mary Reynolds I have. I need to get The Bull from the Sea. So yeah, this is the top shelf here. Okay, so this is not a book, but this little like a little article, a little pamphlet I have on the Elgin Marbles. Just a few pages here. Yeah, just a little curiosity, I guess. I have here a book. This is it's from Cambridge University Press. This is The Return of Cultural Treasures, which I got to just predominantly for one chapter, but then ended up being interested in all the other chapters. The chapter on the Elgin Marbles, the Elgin Marble debate. So yeah, cool. I was very lucky to find this because I think this is a little expensive online, but I found it really cheap at a used bookstore. So I got really lucky. Here's a book by Anthony Caldelas, a scholar I've mentioned a few times throughout this bookshelf tour. This is The Christian Parthenon, Classicism and Pilgrimage in Byzantine Athens. Now you have a Byzantine Pericles. So yeah, that's a cool book. Here we have a book. This is The Parthenon Enigma, a new understanding of the West's most iconic building and the people who made it. And weirdly enough, this book about the Parthenon has a quote from George Lucas, the inventor of Star Wars, on the back. That was random. This next book is one of the greatest literary forgeries of all time. And I'm continuously shocked at how few people seem to talk about it nowadays, as if it's almost completely forgotten, which is kind of crazy to think. This is the Poems of Ossian, and related works. And Ossian was, I'll say, unleashed upon Europe in the latter half of the 18th century, and it was presented to the public as a genuine historical epic, or a collection of heroic stories from an ancient Scottish bard named Ossian. But then, of course, people became suspicious, and it was eventually revealed that it was not a genuine work from deep in antiquity of some from ancient Scottish bard, from the 2,000 years ago. It was actually written by a contemporary named James McAfferson, but despite being outed as being a forgery, it still took Europe by storm. It had a huge degree of influence, not just on literature, but on things like music as well. Operas and symphonies were composed due to inspiration from this work. And fun fact, the President Thomas Jefferson considered Ossian to be the greatest poet who ever lived. But he didn't know that he was actually saying James McAfferson was the greatest poet who ever lived. That's what he was really saying. He didn't know it, though. He thought it was a genuine work. What was I going to say? Oh, and another American who wrote about it besides Jefferson was not Thomas Carlyle. Henry David Thoreau. He wrote a essay called it was Ossian, Chaucer, Homer, or Homer, Chaucian, Homer, Chaucer, Ossian. It was some order of those three names. Thomas Carlyle came to mind because Thoreau also wrote a essay about Thomas Carlyle and his works. But anyways, this is the Poems of Ossian. And then I have this book here. This is The Reception of Ossian in Europe. Here we have Glenn Maxwell's book on poetry. Book here. This is I keep saying a book here as if I don't even know why I keep doing that. This is Celebrating Homer's Landscapes, Troy and Ithaca Revisited. So it's just this author is just going and looking at the landscapes that are described in the Homeric poems and just appreciating them. So you get a lot of pictures in here. Let's see. Let's see here. We have this 18th century novel. This is The Man of Feeling by Henry Mackenzie. And then we have two very, very early works, two little novels by Percy Bysshe. This is Zastrozzi and St. Irvyne, which I believe he wrote when he was 19. Here we have Eric Newby's On the Shores of the Mediterranean. He wrote many travel books. This book is a literary companion to travel in Greece, just an anthology of people traveling to Greece. This goes all the way, let's see. Yeah, it just collects poetry and journal entries and all that stuff. So a cool little volume to have. Here is The Archaeology of Crete. Here we have a edition. This is the last edition of Moby Dick that I'll show you, with this amazing illustration of Captain Ahab. Look at those eyes. I have too many copies of Moby Dick. I've only shown you like 3 or 4 on this bookshelf tour, but I have more elsewhere. Believe you me. But this is one of my favorite editions. This is Barbara K. Lowalski's edition of Paradise Lost, which presents it as it was presented to the public, with the same spelling and everything. And then we have William T. Vollmann. We have The Ice Shirt. This is the first volume in the 7 Dreams. We have Fathers and Crows. And an interesting thing about this, I bought this online for like $4. I bought it used. And it was in really bad condition, and it sat on my shelf for a while. And then when I went to pick it up to read it, I was flipping through the books, flipping through the pages. This bookshelf tour is driving me delirious. I was flipping through the pages, and I realized something. And this is like 7 months after buying the book. So I bought it for I bought it for $4 online, and then it sat on my bookshelf for 7 months. And then I realized, only after 7 months, that it was signed. So I I have a signed edition of Fathers and Crows, which is kind of cool. Here we have Argal. This is the 3rd volume of the 7 Dreams. And then I have here The Dying Grass, his novel of the Nez Perce War. I don't have a copy of The Rifles right now. I had a copy and I don't know where it went. So yeah, that's this shelf here. Okay, so here we have a work of ecology. This is Sea of Slaughter by Farley Mowat. Next we have The Search for the Giant Squid. This came out in the 90s, and we have since documented giant squid on camera, which I think at the time of when the author was writing this book, I think that had happened, but there's been a lot more sightings and footage since. So I'd love to see like a revised edition of this. And also recently, this year, a colossal squid was documented alive for the first time, but it was like it was a really small baby. But yeah, a subject that deeply interests me. Next we have, this is a Penguin Classic volume. This is The Loss of the Ship Essex, Sunk by a Whale, first-person accounts. These are the first-person accounts of the event which helped to inspire the book Moby Dick, when an enraged sperm whale sunk the ship Essex. Penguin was kind enough to include all those accounts in a single volume, which is great. There's a book here. This is the story of New England whalers. I used to have a lot more whaling books. Can you guess why? Here we have, this is de Crevecoeur, who wrote a famous work called Letters for, what was it? Is it Letters from an American Farmer? I think that's the full title. Which these are the various chapters about life in the colonies. This is in the, I think was it prior to the Revolution? I forget what year it came out. It was published, but there were chapters in there on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, and I found this little paperback, and it's the letters, de Crevecoeur's letters, just dealing with Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, which were really the only chapters that I was interested in that work. And so I couldn't believe my eyes when I found this edition. I was like, oh, this book was for me. Someone made this for me, just for me. So, anyway, this is Joshua Slocum's Sailing Alone Around the World. This is a book by Herschel Parker. This is Melville Biography, An Inside Narrative. We'll see his 2-volume biography in a second here. But after Herschel Parker, spent nearly half a century researching Melville and writing the most comprehensive biography that he's ever had or will ever have, he then wrote this, which was, I guess, I've not read this yet, but my knowledge of it is that it was the experience of writing the biography, the research he had done, his thoughts on the state of biography, the importance of archival research, and I believe he discusses also in here, new directions that can be taken in Melville studies. One important thing to note is a absolute, I would say breakthrough, that's not the right word, but the ultimate discovery that is yet to be made in Melville studies is the manuscript for Isle of the Cross, the fabled lost Melville novel. So yeah, anyway, I'm a Melville. I'm a huge fan of Melville. He's my favorite author. So, anytime I see his name on something, I pretty much get it. Speaking of which, I have this. This here is a very interesting book. This is Herman Melville, Cycle and Epicycle, and it's by Eleanor Melville Metcalf, Melville's granddaughter. And this is a collection of like extracts from letters and diary entries and journals of Melville and people around Melville's life that illustrate Melville as a person, as an individual. And so, but yeah, and it was put together by Melville's granddaughter, which is really cool. And this is kind of hard to get. I feel like I've said this many times on this bookshelf tour, but I feel very lucky that I found this for a really good price. Here we have this is the letters of Herman Melville, which I actually got recently. I got this online for very cheap. It's one of those books that editions I was monitoring the internet for good copies of. I need to wrap this this dust jacket in Mylar. I need to do that. Here we have Donald Culross Peattie. This is A Book of Hours. Here we have J.A. Baker's The Peregrine. Werner Herzog fans will know why I have this. Here we have what is called a curiosity of Coleridge studies. This is, I always forget this author's name. This is, what's his name here? I always forget. John Livingston Lowes. This is The Road to Xanadu, a study in the ways of the imagination, this was published about 100 years ago, and in which this author examines two poems. The first one is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and the second one is Kubla Khan, two poems by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, which this author believes are the two greatest poems in English. And he looks at those two poems, and he looks at Coleridge's notebooks, Coleridge's other writings. He delves so deep into everything that could be possibly known about the internal life and mind of Coleridge to bring to bear how on earth Coleridge conceived The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan. Yeah, I could tell a few funny things about this book and this author, but that'll be another time. Here is Edith Hamilton. This is The Greek Way and the Roman Way, two volumes in one. Usually you see these books as like mass market paperbacks or trade paperbacks. You can pretty reliably find them in used bookstores, but I was waiting for a while to eventually find this particular edition, this combined volume, so glad to have this. Here we have Gravity's Rainbow, Thomas Pynchon. Andre Belle's Petersburg. Just have this Penguin 20th Century Classic. Okay, here we have A Book of One's Own, People and Their Diaries. Here we have our last lobe of this bookshelf tour. This is Quintus of Smyrna. This is The Fall of Troy, translated by Arthur Way. I don't think Loeb publishes this translation anymore. They publish a new translation of Quintus of Smyrna, and they don't title it The Fall of Troy. They just title it Post Homerica. I don't know the name of the new translator, but this is a really good translation. I'd recommend this one. Here we have Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This is Airman's Odyssey. This has Wind, Sand, and Stars, Night Flight, and Flight to Aras. And I have this is the first US edition, so that's kind of cool. Okay, going down here, we have, this is the New English Bible. This is from Penguin, and it came in a box set, which is kind of interesting. So we have that, and then another Penguin Bible. This is the King James in their black spine edition. So yeah, a classic of travel literature. This is The Station, Athos, Treasures and Men by Robert Byron. Robert Byron also wrote another work that I would like to get called The Road to Oxiana. I want to get that book as well. But yeah. The Station. Okay, so this next book here is a book that I could recommend to literally anybody. This book is delightful, and I love it. I love this. This is The Royal Road to Romance, considered to be one of the greatest travel books ever written, and I would agree. I would agree with that statement. I love this. Yeah. Again, I could recommend this book to anybody. This is Ralph Bagnall's Sand, Wind, and War, Memoirs of a Desert Explorer. He wrote a work called Libyan Sands, which I had at one point and I don't currently. This is Nikos Kazantzakis. This is his travels in Greece. And then finishing up here with a few biographies, we have William H. McNeill's biography of Arnold Toynbee. This is Toynbee, A Life. And then this is Conversations with Toynbee. This is called Toynbee on Toynbee. So, yep. Then here we have a biography of Tolstoy. We saw this biographer earlier. I have his biography of Alexander Pushkin, which kind of has the same design, cover design, as this biography of Tolstoy. And then here we have, this is Patrice Gueneffi's Bonaparte, which takes place from his birth to when he becomes first consul. So this is volume 1 of, I think, of a 2-volume biography, but the second volume, I don't know if it's been published yet, or if it in French, or if it just hasn't been yet translated to English, but yeah, I'm waiting for volume 2. This is half of Napoleon's life, basically. And then finally, our last work here, this is Herschel Parker's biography of Herman Melville. The first volume is from Melville, his birth to the publication of Moby Dick, 1851, and then volume 2 of Moby Dick and after. So yeah, that was my bookshelf tour. I'm completely exhausted. I did not imagine this would take as long as it did, and as many videos as it did. I hope it was watchable. I hope you enjoyed it. If you managed to watch all of it, that's pretty cool. I'm really glad that it was entertaining enough to endure for that long. And I'd love to know what you think of the books you've seen. Is there any books that you saw that you've not heard of before that really interest you, or anything like that? Or do you have any, based on what you've seen on my bookshelves, do you have any book recommendations for me based on the subjects you've seen? Yeah, I'd just love to talk in the comments about, books, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I feel delirious after all this talking about books. So again, thank you if you made it this far, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye.